A man stumbles in the dust of a crowded street. Moments earlier, he could not stand at all. Now his legs tremble beneath him as neighbors reach out, unsure whether to help or step back. Someone whispers that it happened instantly. Another insists there must be a natural explanation. Across the square, a scribe pauses, stylus hovering over wax, deciding whether this moment is worth recording, or whether it will be dismissed as rumor by tomorrow. In the ancient world, events like this were not described the way we describe them today. There were no medical charts, no laboratory tests, no cameras to verify what the eye had seen. And yet, historians, physicians, philosophers, and chroniclers still wrote about extraordinary healings, visions, and signs. They used careful language, sometimes cautious, sometimes restrained, always shaped by how truth itself was understood in their time. So how did ancient historians describe miracles? What words did they choose, and which ones did they avoid? And how did their cultural assumptions shape the way events surrounding Jesus were remembered, recorded, and transmitted? Modern readers often imagine biblical miracles as isolated spectacles, standing apart from history. But the ancient world did not separate the extraordinary from daily life so easily. To understand the Gospels more deeply, we must first learn how ancient people recognized, evaluated, and spoke about wonders. Welcome to Legacy of the Scriptures. If this kind of biblical history matters to you, consider subscribing. In the first century, history was not written to impress the future. It was written to preserve memory, explain order, and make sense of events that seemed to disrupt the expected rhythm of life. A chronicler did not ask whether something could be replicated in a laboratory. He asked whether it was worthy of being remembered. This distinction shapes everything we must understand about how miracles were described in the ancient world. Ancient historians lived in societies where illness, injury, and sudden death were constant companions. Life in the time of Jesus was fragile. Infections spread quickly. Disabilities were common. Medical knowledge existed, but it was limited and unevenly applied. Because suffering was ordinary, a sudden restoration of health stood out sharply against daily experience. What modern readers label a miracle, ancient observers often described as a remarkable event that broke with what was normally expected. Writers such as Josephus or Tacitus did not deny the possibility of extraordinary occurrences, but they were careful. Their credibility depended on restraint. To exaggerate was to risk being dismissed. As a result, ancient historical writing often underplays the dramatic, even when reporting events that today would seem extraordinary. This restraint is one of the most important keys for reading both secular histories and the Gospels side by side. In first-century Judaism, history was never merely a record of facts, it was a reflection on meaning. Events were remembered not only for what happened, but for what they revealed about God, justice, or moral order. A healing was not isolated from its context. Who was healed? Where did it happen? What social boundaries were crossed? These questions mattered as much as the physical change itself. This explains why biblical narratives often focus on setting, witnesses, and reaction rather than medical detail. At the same time, the Greco-Roman world had its own categories for extraordinary events. Philosophers debated whether wonders were divine signs, natural phenomena not yet understood, or exaggerations spread by crowds. Physicians like Galen acknowledged spontaneous recoveries while avoiding religious interpretation. Historians navigated between belief and skepticism, often leaving judgment to the reader. This balance created a shared cultural language for speaking about wonders without fully explaining them. When the Gospels were written, they emerged within this environment. They did not invent a new genre called miracle story. They participated in an existing historical conversation. Their accounts of healings, exorcisms, and signs reflect the same careful attention to witnesses, public spaces, and social consequences that we find in other ancient texts. This is why the evangelists rarely describe the mechanism of a miracle. Instead, they describe the moment before, the moment after, and the human response in between. Consider how often a healing in the Gospels leads to amazement, debate, or conflict rather than celebration. This is historically consistent. In the ancient world, a wonder was not self-interpreting. It demanded evaluation. Was it a sign of divine favor, a threat to social order, or something misunderstood? These questions lingered long after the event itself. One gospel passage captures this mindset clearly, and amazement seized them all, and they glorified God and were filled with awe. Luke 5:26. The text does not insist on belief. It records reaction. Awe, uncertainty, and glorification coexist. This is not the language of propaganda. It is the language of lived experience in a world where the extraordinary could not be easily categorized. Understanding this helps modern readers slow down. Instead of asking whether ancient people were naive, we begin to see how carefully they spoke about what disrupted ordinary life. Miracles were not written to shock, they were written to be weighed. In the next part, we will step closer to the historians themselves and examine the specific vocabulary they used when describing extraordinary events, and why that vocabulary matters for how we read the Gospels today. When ancient historians approached events that disrupted ordinary expectations, they relied on language that signaled care rather than certainty. Words mattered deeply. To describe something as astonishing was safer than calling it divine. To say an event was reported by many was more acceptable than claiming full understanding. This vocabulary of restraint allowed historians to preserve credibility, while still acknowledging that something unusual had occurred. In Greek and Roman historical writing, terms often translated today as miracle were rarely used in isolation. Writers preferred phrases that emphasize perception and response rather than explanation. An event might be described as paradoxical, unexpected, or contrary to nature. These expressions did not deny reality. They simply avoided conclusions. The historian's role was not to resolve mystery, but to record that mystery had entered public awareness. This careful approach is visible in the work of Pliny the Elder, who catalogued extraordinary phenomena without always endorsing them. He documented strange healings, unusual natural events, and unexplained recoveries, often adding phrases that distanced himself from certainty. His readers were invited to consider, not to be coerced into belief. In this way, ancient historiography respected the limits of human knowledge. The same pattern appears in Jewish historical memory. Events were remembered through testimony and communal recognition. A healing became significant not simply because it happened, but because it was witnessed, discussed, and integrated into collective memory. This explains why so many biblical accounts emphasize crowds, public spaces, and dialogue. The presence of others validated that something real had taken place, even if its meaning remained debated. In the Gospels, the vocabulary reflects this shared world of careful description. Jesus' actions are often followed by questions rather than conclusions. What is this? A new teaching, with authority. Mark 1:27. The language is observational. Authority is recognized, but its source is not immediately defined. This mirrors how ancient readers were accustomed to encountering reports of wonders, as events demanding interpretation rather than instant agreement. Importantly, the evangelists do not argue miracles into existence. They narrate them within the flow of daily life in the Bible. A healing interrupts work, travel, or worship. It creates tension with religious authorities or social norms. These narrative choices align closely with ancient historical conventions, where extraordinary events were embedded in ordinary settings to enhance credibility. Ancient physicians also influenced how wonders were described. Medical writers acknowledged spontaneous recoveries and unexplained improvements, even while maintaining natural explanations whenever possible. This medical realism shaped the cultural imagination. A healing could be extraordinary without being irrational. It could be acknowledged without being dissected. This balance allowed audiences to accept reports without abandoning reason. Modern readers often expect ancient texts to either prove or disprove miracles. But ancient historians were not writing apologetics or refutations. They were preserving memory. Their caution was not skepticism, it was professionalism. By limiting interpretation, they protected the record itself. This is why the Gospel accounts, when read within their historical context, sound less like legends and more like restrained testimonies shaped by communal experience. Another biblical passage reflects this tone clearly. And fear came on all, and they glorified God, saying, "A great prophet has arisen among us." Luke 7:16. Fear, interpretation, and praise appear together. The text records response, not resolution. This layered reaction is exactly what we would expect from first-century audiences encountering something they could not easily explain. As we move forward, this language of caution becomes a powerful lens. It helps us recognize that the Gospel writers were not exaggerating wonders, but situating them within a responsible historical framework. In the next part, we will explore how witnesses and public memory played a decisive role in determining whether extraordinary events were preserved or forgotten. In the ancient world, an extraordinary event did not become history simply because it occurred. It became history because it was witnessed, remembered, and retold within a community. Private experiences faded quickly. Public events endured. This distinction is essential for understanding how miracles entered historical records and why so many biblical accounts unfold in open, communal spaces. Ancient historians relied heavily on testimony. Without modern documentation, credibility rested on the number, status, and consistency of witnesses. An event seen by many, discussed openly, and remembered over time carried weight, even if its cause remained unexplained. This is why ancient writers often emphasized crowds, reactions, and disputes. Debate itself signaled that something real had happened. In first-century Judaism, memory was communal before it was textual. Stories were shaped through repetition in households, synagogues, and marketplaces. Accuracy was preserved not through verbatim recall, but through stable core elements: who was involved, where it happened, and what changed afterward. A healing that restored someone to family, work, or worship was difficult to dismiss because its social consequences were visible long after the moment itself. The Gospels reflect this deeply historical process. Many miracles occur in public view: village streets, synagogues, temple courts. The evangelists consistently record not only the event, but the reaction of those present: amazement, fear, controversy, or resistance. These responses function as historical markers. They tell the reader that the event entered shared memory and demanded interpretation. This pattern aligns closely with broader Greco-Roman historical practice. Writers like Suetonius often included reports of omens or extraordinary occurrences surrounding major figures, carefully attributing them to public rumor or widespread testimony. The historian did not need to explain the event. Its circulation among the people was enough to justify its inclusion. In the Gospels, witnesses are rarely portrayed as passive believers. They question, argue, and sometimes oppose what they see. This realism strengthens the historical texture of the narratives. Legends tend to erase resistance. Historical memories preserve it. When religious leaders challenge a healing or question its source, the text reflects how real communities struggle to interpret disruptive events. One brief biblical example illustrates this dynamic. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar said, "Is not this the man who used to sit and beg?" John 9:8. The miracle is not announced by the healed man alone. It is confirmed through recognition, comparison, and debate. The focus is not on spectacle, but on identity and change. Importantly, ancient audiences understood that memory could be shaped, but not invented wholesale. Too many witnesses meant too many corrections. Stories that contradicted shared experience were filtered out over time. This is why the miracles remembered were often those with lasting social impact: restored mobility, restored sight, restored inclusion. For modern readers seeking to understand biblical history, this offers an important insight. The Gospel writers were not asking readers to believe in isolation. They were preserving events, already embedded in communal memory. Miracles survived because they changed lives in visible, enduring ways. In the next part, we will examine how ancient critics and skeptics responded to reported miracles, and how their objections paradoxically confirm that such events were widely known and discussed. Wherever extraordinary events were remembered, debate followed. The ancient world was not a landscape of unquestioning belief. On the contrary, skepticism was woven into philosophical, religious, and historical discourse. Wonders were discussed, weighed, and often contested. This culture of disagreement is one of the strongest indicators that reports of miracles were taken seriously enough to require explanation. Ancient critics rarely denied that something unusual had occurred. Instead, they questioned how it should be interpreted. Was a healing the work of the divine, the result of hidden knowledge, or the power of persuasion over the human body? These questions mattered deeply in societies where authority, religious or political, depended on how such events were understood. Philosophers trained in Greco-Roman traditions often preferred naturalistic explanations. They argued that phenomena labeled as wonders might arise from causes not yet understood. This was not mockery, but method. To preserve intellectual integrity, thinkers sought explanations that aligned with reason and observation. Yet even these explanations acknowledged that something real had taken place. Skepticism did not erase the event, it reframed it. This same dynamic appears repeatedly in the gospel narratives. When Jesus heals, opposition does not claim that nothing happened. Instead, critics debate the source of his authority. This response fits precisely within ancient patterns of interpretation. A biblical example records this tension clearly. He casts out demons by the prince of demons, Matthew 9:34. The accusation concedes the action while disputing its meaning. Historically, this is a crucial detail. Jewish tradition also contained categories for discerning extraordinary acts. Scripture warned against false signs, not because signs were assumed to be imaginary, but because they were believed to be powerful. Discernment was required. This explains why debates about Jesus often center on legitimacy rather than denial. The question was never simply, did something happen? But what does this reveal about God? Outside the biblical texts, later critics continued this line of argument. Celsus did not claim that reports of Jesus' works were fabricated out of nothing. Instead, he suggested alternative explanations, such as learned techniques or deceptive practices. His critique assumes the circulation of miracle stories as historical fact within Christian communities. Opposition, paradoxically, preserves evidence of widespread belief. From a historical perspective, this matters greatly. Legends tend to silence critics by overwhelming the narrative with certainty. Historical memory preserves dispute. The presence of sustained argument, recorded from multiple perspectives, signals that the events in question occupied real space in public consciousness. Ancient historians understood this well. Recording controversy was a way of recording reality. When opposing interpretations coexist in a text, it suggests that the author is preserving memory rather than manufacturing consensus. The Gospels repeatedly do this. They allow confusion, resistance, and misunderstanding to remain unresolved. For modern readers exploring biblical history, this challenges simplified assumptions. The world of the New Testament was intellectually active and socially complex. Miracles were not accepted blindly, nor dismissed casually. They were discussed in marketplaces, synagogues, and homes, exactly where historical memory is formed. As we move into the next part, we will look at how the Gospel writers themselves positioned their accounts, not as technical explanations, but as testimonies shaped by meaning, purpose, and lived encounter with the historical Jesus. By the time the Gospels were written, the question was no longer whether extraordinary events had occurred. The question was how those events should be understood. This is where the evangelists differ subtly, but decisively, from other ancient historians. They do not attempt to explain how miracles work. They focus on what miracles do within human lives. This choice is historically consistent. As we have seen, Ancient writers rarely explained mechanisms behind wonders. But the Gospels go one step further. They place miracles within a moral and relational framework. Healings restore people not only to health, but to family, work, and worship. Signs provoke decisions rather than conclusions. They reveal character, both of Jesus and of those who encounter him. A short biblical passage reflects this restraint clearly. And he would not permit the demons to speak because they knew him. Mark 1:34. Silence follows power. Control follows action. The narrative does not press for spectacle. It preserves meaning. For ancient audiences, this was enough. They recognized a familiar historical pattern. Public events, witnessed and debated, whose significance unfolded over time. The evangelists wrote not as technicians of the supernatural, but as careful stewards of memory, situating the historical Jesus within the real intellectual and cultural world of first-century Judaism. With this perspective, miracles are no longer interruptions of history, they are part of it. When modern readers approach miracle stories, they often bring modern expectations, proof, mechanism, certainty. The ancient world expected something different: credible testimony, communal memory, and meaningful disruption of ordinary life. When we read the Gospels within this historical framework, the distance between faith and history narrows. Miracles in the time of Jesus were not written to overwhelm reason, but to invite reflection. They were remembered because they changed lives in visible ways and forced communities to ask enduring questions about God, authority, and restoration. Understanding how ancient historians described wonders helps us read the Gospel accounts not as isolated religious claims, but as historically grounded narratives shaped by real people, real places, and real debate. This perspective does not simplify faith, it deepens it. It allows Jesus to stand fully within human history while still pointing beyond it. Thank you for watching Legacy of the Scriptures. If this exploration of biblical history was meaningful to you, consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, sharing it with others, and leaving a comment with a reflection or question.